This podcast is part of the Deluxe Edition Network. To find other great shows on the network, head over to deluxeeditionnetwork.com. That's deluxeeditionnetwork.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another amazing episode of the Stephen Jarvis and Friends podcast. Today with me is Ryan Smith, and before we get into our little episode here, go over to the deluxeeditionnetwork.com where you'll find the podcasts for the month of May, which are The Real Drunks and Horsing Around, and you'll find other great podcasts on the network as well. Hey, Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Glad to be done moving.
Still in the midst of it?
A little bit, yeah.
It's a never-ending thing once you get going.
Oh, definitely. That's the only bad thing that sucks about everything is that it never ends.
I was going to say a year from now, you'll still be probably unpacking a box or two.
Yeah, probably. No, a year from now, we're probably going to be moving again. So hopefully getting a house. So, Ryan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, I guess in terms of my personal background, so I've been married for almost 25 years now. I've got 5 kids and a grandkid. I was in the Army for 5 years and lived in Hawaii, and then I lived out on the East Coast for 8 years, working for a software company, and then they let me move here to the Midwest about 8 years ago-ish. All through that time, I was interested in doing some filmmaking things. It started off as wanting to be a comic book artist, and then I found out pretty quickly that I'm a terrible artist. And but drawing did lend itself well to doing sequential art, which works well with filmmaking. So I started off doing special effects thing, learning how to add explosions and blood bursts and all kinds of stuff. And did a smaller project called The Terrible Old Man, which is based off of an H.P. Lovecraft short story that went to the Lovecraft Film Festival out in Portland, Oregon. And then I guess about 4 or 5 years ago, I started writing Eldritch, and here we are. We finally finished Eldritch USA after having survived a pandemic.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, hell, I've been doing this for 4 years, and everyone's like, man, why don't you give it up? And it's like, I love it too much, and I'm sure that's why you got into the field you got into is because of love for what you're doing.
Absolutely.
So other than the movie the movie's done, right?
It is. It's actually currently in its film festival circuit. We're actively looking for distributors so people at large can watch it. We've got a couple different distributors that we're talking to right now. We actually just won 4 awards at the Atlantis Festival out in LA. We were nominated for 7 awards, and we ended up winning for director, screenplay, actor, and choreography, actually.
Nice. Hey, Mark, how are you doing today? That's one of my buddy, Mark. He's also part of the network. If you ever heard of the Talking Shit show.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he's...
Is it literally talking shit? Or?
Oh, yeah, they literally talk shit on there. And it's great. It's weird, but, they're successful at it. So I told them, I'm like, you know what? Keep doing it. What other projects are you looking to do? Any like horror, action movies, anything like that?
So yeah, I've got a couple other projects that we're currently working on. I'm actively writing a screenplay right now with another local filmmaker that is a kind of a rom-com, but also has kind of a rocky, get behind the guy as he rises to the top kind of a feel to it. It'll be quirky. It's called Fork. It's about a guy. Curtis Killingsworth is the one who came up with the story and asked me to come on and write the screenplay for him. And it's about a guy who his life kind of falls apart, and a way of trying to he finds his courage or strength or whatever you want to call it again is he decides to build the world's largest fork. And so it's kind of a quirky story.
I mean, hey, maybe we need that. I mean, it couldn't be any worse, sounding than Halloween Ends. So, but
and then I've got another story that I'm working on as well that kind of combines some different elements together. It's going to take H.P. Lovecraft's Rats in the Walls and also Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart, and also some elements of drug addiction, and kind of combine them all together into one story. So it's tentatively called In the Walls.
What started your love or fascination for the work by H.P. Lovecraft?
Honestly, Bruce Campbell and Evil Dead really kind of kicked that off. So I loved the Evil Dead films. I loved Army of Darkness, watched it a ton growing up. And the Necronomicon just fascinated me. And it didn't occur to me until I think I was in my 20s that I was like, I think the Necronomicon is from something else. So I did a little bit of research, and I was like, who's this Lovecraft guy? So I just started reading more and more of his things, and really enjoyed it. He's got a lot of interesting themes that he brings forward, and I feel like he was pretty unique for his time period.
Yeah, without a doubt. I know they wanted me to do a book report on him in high school one time, and I was just like, I'm sorry, I can't do it. So they're like, okay, well, who are you going to do it on? And it's just like, can I do it on Edgar Allan Poe? And the teacher was like, really? Why don't you just say William Shakespeare by that point? And it's just like, fine, Stephen King. And the teacher actually let me do one on Stephen King, and she's pretty happy with my report.
He's a pretty prolific writer. He just keeps putting things out and putting things out and putting things out. I'm not going to say all of his stuff is gold, but yeah. I feel like if you put out that much content, you're going to have a fair amount of good stuff.
So with this movie that's making the rounds, as you said, could you give us a little bit more, like what's the story behind it, the plot?
Yeah, it's called Eldritch USA. It's a horror and a comedy and a musical. It's a story about two brothers who are constantly kind of in sibling rivalry with one another, and the younger brother, who's the main character of the film, is always in his older brother's shadow. They both work for a news station, and so the older brother's face is on TV all the time, and the younger brother is actually his cameraman and has to follow him around everywhere. Well, they end up finding a cult out kind of in the sticks, a hillbilly cult that claims that they can bring people back to life, and they go to do a news story on it, but they can't prove anything. And then as the story moves on, somebody that they know also dies. And so they decide, what the heck, they bring this person out to the hillbillies. And after a few repeated attempts, they finally are successful, and they bring them back to life. And everything is hunky-dory until they realize that what they brought back was not necessarily what they thought it was. And things start to go bad really fast.
So kind of like a Pet Sematary element to it.
Yeah, it's a little bit of Pet Sematary. It's got the Necronomicon in it. It's got some other Lovecraft things like the Silver Key and some other elements from that. It's got kind of a Little Shop of Horrors feel as far as the musical part of it. Really, if you wanted to compare it to a Lovecraft story, it shares a lot of similarities with one called the Dunwich Horror.
So with that in mind, for distribution, do you want it to go like with what you see with some fan films where it goes on YouTube, Instagram and all that, or are you looking for a larger release?
We're aiming for higher than that. We're in talks with some fairly big names, not the tippy top names. We're not talking to like Universal or anything like that, but we're talking to some well-known distributors now. I'm hesitant to say the names, but just to throw out some examples, I'd love to see it at the same level as like Neon, A24, XYZ, somewhere at that tier is what we would like to see. So that's what we're shooting for at the moment. And the preference would be that we would get an initial, at least a limited theatrical release, followed by DVD and rental release, followed by streaming service like Hulu or something like that.
Oh, okay. How long did this take from pen to paper to filming to where it is today?
So we initially started writing it. I initially started writing it about 4 years ago, maybe 4.5 years ago. Part of the process that made it take longer was I knew pretty early on that I wanted it to be a musical, and so I worked with my nephew. He's actually the lead singer of a band now called Fox Royale. If any of your listeners haven't heard of Fox Royale, they should look them up. They're really great. And basically we would go along in the story, and I would go along in the story, and I would say, okay, we need a song here that gets us from point A to point B. So I would get together with my nephew, and we would work back and forth on the lyrics and the theme. And then once we kind of had that set, then he would go off and write the music, and I would start to work on the next part because I kind of knew where we left off. So writing that way made it take a little bit of extra time. We finished and we're ready to do a Kickstarter to raise the funds right at the beginning of 2020. And then the pandemic hit right when we were in the middle of our Kickstarter. Kickstarter graciously gave us a couple extra weeks to try to hit our goal, which we did. But then we couldn't film for a year and a half. So in the meantime, we were trying to do as much pre-production as we could. We did all the location scouting and the casting and tried to get everything ready, tried to work on some of the dance numbers. And then we started filming August of 2021. We were done by December of 2021. And then over the next year, I spent that time doing editing and special effects, and once we got to kind of a finalized point, then I handed it off to the audio engineers and we finished it. So the film officially finished this last April.
Oh, okay. With, as you said, with the pandemic, was there any testing that you had to do? I know with a lot of like Vengeance and Roseblood and all that, they had to test some actors and make sure they tested themselves so that they weren't positive and all that. So was there any of that on your set?
I think before we ever started filming, we just verified with everyone that nobody had any symptoms, or that people had we're not currently sick or anything like that. And then every day we had people come on set. We had one of those temperature testers where we would just check everybody who came in, make sure they didn't have a fever, make sure nobody had any symptoms. And I don't know that we never had any outbreaks. We never really had anybody. I think at one point we might have had one of our side actors say that they were sick and they weren't going to come in. But really, I think it only happened once, and it didn't really affect anyone else.
Did you pick any of the music for the film, or was someone else doing that?
So because it's a musical, it has 13 original songs that were all written specifically for the film. As far as all the additional stuff, I hired a composer who's actually a guy out in Ukraine. There's some stories of him writing music while rockets are going down around him, literally. But he got that sent, and that was all accomplished. And then there's additional songs that you hear in the background, but it's all from the band Guys on a Bus, which is the band that my nephew was in at the time when we were making the film. So he helped me write the music. So he also let us use the music from his band for bar scenes and things like that.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, heck, we wouldn't have some of the music today if, some directors didn't, do that. John Carpenter's a big one, what's to say Halloween theme would have been what it is today if he didn't do it.
That's probably the biggest question we get when most people are finished watching the film is where can they get the soundtrack? So that's something that unfortunately we can't put out until the distribution deal is in place. But once that's done, we'll definitely be working on getting a soundtrack out for people to listen to.
So you hear that, everyone? They're trying. they are trying.
If I could put it out today, I would.
Yeah. They're all like, oh, please. But, so as an independent filmmaker, do you like more of the independent stuff, or would you want to be able to be in like Hollywood and all that?
Well, I would love to say that I had a point of reference where I could compare. So, I mean, I enjoyed the process. It was great. Most of the people who were on set said they enjoyed the process as well. I would say that doing an independent film is not without its share of frustrations, limited resources, trying to make whatever deals you can to get things done as efficiently, but also as cheaply as you can. So I mean, it would be nice to take a step up and know that a film is fully funded and things are going to be paid for and you don't have to worry about any of that. Probably the biggest frustration as an independent filmmaker was that we had to juggle everyone's schedules. Everyone had full-time jobs.
Yeah.
And so we all agreed for the first, I think 9 days of shooting, everybody took a week off of work. So we had the weekend before, the week of, and the weekend after that we just shot for 9 days straight. That was great. It gave us a huge head start on the film. But the rest of it was all nights and weekends whenever we could sneak in. And it was a lot of juggling different people's schedules. So ton of work. I would say that if I could do a film where we could just tell everyone, hey, we're going to shoot for 30 days straight and be done, I think that would be a completely different experience.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, you got to go around everyone's schedule because, it's a small film, but at the same time, I get a kick out of it how people back in the day, they put independent film on such a high pedestal because we had such great ones. And now today they're like, oh, it's not a Hollywood production. It's like, they're better than Hollywood.
It's independent films are a lot more attainable than they used to be with all the way cameras have gone and the way the software has gone. It's become a lot easier to make a film where you see the skill is for people who are able to use all of that and make a film well. And it really does. It just takes a lot of time and commitment to go over things several times to make sure you're doing it right.
Well, I mean, yeah. And then, of course, if a film did really well, then you had the rip-offs, and most of them were just cash grabs. Looking at you, Grizzly. I
hear they're doing Cocaine Shark now, aren't they? Or something like that.
God.
Meth Shark or something.
Meth Shark or something, yeah. Weed Shark or, yeah, something like that. It's horrible, the things that... But, I mean, look at Sharknado. Look at how much that spawned off.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of movies out there that they're low budget, but they accept that they're low budget. They embrace it. And whenever you watch it and you go into it, just knowing that, it just makes it a fun movie.
Well, definitely. I mean, you look at the movies back in the 70s and all that, even back during Hitchcock's, dominance, people look back on them nowadays. My generation will look back at them and be like, God, how did anyone think this is scary? Or how does anyone think this is good? And it's just like, because they are good. Heck, I've probably seen Halloween almost 1,000 times, and I've always loved stuff like that because you got to give it to independent filmmakers. They make better stuff. They show their love for what they are building. And they put the actual story in there, where with Hollywood, they got to have all the glitz and glamour, so.
It can get a little formulaic sometimes with some of the Hollywood pieces. I will say that's kind of the nice thing about Halloween and some of the Hitchcock pieces like Psycho, that they're tense. They do a good job of building tension. They're not super gory films. A lot of the things nowadays, I know people like super gory films. There's the occasional super gory film that I enjoy, but you can build so much tension and so much, horror without having to, have somebody being ripped in half with a chainsaw or something.
Definitely. I mean, ask Bruce Campbell. He'll probably tell you he wishes that Sam Raimi wouldn't have squirted him so much with all the blood they had on there.
Now, I will say that the new Evil Dead is a lot of fun. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I haven't even seen it yet.
I don't know that you can get much bloodier than that one.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but I'm hoping I'm going to probably wait until it comes out, so then I just buy it.
I kept telling my wife it would have been a good movie to watch on Mother's Day, but I don't think she believed me.
You should have played her the old classic Mother's Day. It's weird that after Halloween, they had a movie for almost every holiday.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to really think now to find some of the obscure ones to try to come up with a horror movie for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at Halloween. who in their right mind would want to name a film Halloween? Because people would probably have thought, hey, oh, it's about people going out trick-or-treating. When the original title for it was The Babysitter Murders. And someone said, no, you should make it about Halloween. It's never been done before. And took off.
There is something to be said about whenever you're making a film, a way that you can make it more memorable is by making it during a specific holiday, because then people start to identify that holiday with the film. So that was one thing with the Fork movie we're working on now. I think we're going to try to put it for during the 4th of July. So then it gives people something to identify with. And actually, I'm doing visual effects for another film that a local filmmaker is doing here called Happy Halloween. And it's another slasher film. Not exactly the same as Halloween, but it's got its own flavor.
So with Fork, could you give us a little more about that movie?
I didn't really ask Curtis for his permission. It's about a guy whose life has kind of fallen apart. He's been recently separated from his wife. He is a property owner for a rental property where he's got all kinds of tenants in there, and all the tenants are they're very unique. They're very, you could say odd, and he is just constantly dealing with all of the things that go on with that. And eventually he comes across a large fork in town, and something about it kind of strikes close to home for him, and it gives him something to rally behind and something to build towards. And so it's supposed to be kind of a feel good, kind of a rom-com. He meets somebody else at the same time that he starts to get attached to. And then it's just supposed to have that quirky element that comes in with some of the humor. So actually, a lot of the humor in it is similar to Eldritch, partially because I'm writing it. It doesn't have the horror humor that the Eldritch has, but just some of the same tone. So I think it'll be a fun movie.
Why did you come up with the name Eldritch?
So it is a Lovecraftian horror film. So so Eldritch is a word that Lovecraft used a lot whenever he was describing all kinds of things. And so what we decided to do was, because originally I was just going to call it Eldritch, and then my wife said, "Why don't you make Eldritch the name of the town?" And I was like, "That's perfect." So we called it Eldritch, USA. It's the name of the town, and so even though the townspeople have no clue where that name came from, suddenly they start dealing with Lovecraftian type things that are happening in their town.
So in kind of the same vein as like Salem's Lot.
Yes.
Yeah,
very similar.
As soon as you started saying that, I was like, hey, that kind of reminds me a lot like Salem's Lot. Which, very good movie, but I can't wait until you release or get the distribution to release this one, because I looked on Instagram and I seen a couple of pictures of that film, and it's just like, God, it looks good.
Well, initially I envisioned it as a series. I wanted it to be not Stranger Things. It wasn't like an 80s tribute or anything like that, but I wanted it to be an ongoing series about weird things that happen in this town. And the first season would center around these two brothers and this cult that brings people back to life, but then we would have moved on to other stories with the second season. So I still have some ideas kicking around. So in the event that this becomes super popular, it could go on to be a series based, with the film as a starter, or it could go on to have a second film. Just depends on if people really latch onto it.
Hey, I mean, like you said, you got to try.
Yeah, but now that we've made it a musical, that means we got to make all the future stuff a musical too.
Yeah. With the musical route, was it just like, hey, we got action, we got horror, let's put musical in there? Or was that the plan all along?
So honestly, at the time, and I had a kind of an ongoing, I really liked the series Dr. Horrible's Sing-Along blog. I don't know if you've ever seen it before. It's got Neil Patrick Harris in it, and it's about a supervillain named Dr. Horrible, who his lifelong goal is to join the evil league of evil. And then he also has a crush on this girl, and his nemesis, Captain Hammer, finds out that he has a crush on this girl, and so Captain Hammer then starts to pursue her just to get back at him. And it's kind of a 3-episode series that Joss Whedon did before the Avengers, and it was a musical. and it was a lot of fun. And I thought it would be hilarious to have a horror film that had the same kind of vibe as Dr. Horrible. And I would say that Eldritch succeeds in that. So anybody who's had a chance to see Dr. Horrible, if they're wondering what Eldritch is like, it shares a lot of similarities with that series.
Oh, okay. When coming up with the characters, was there any specific way you wanted the characters to be, dress, act?
I wanted to be very Midwestern. I grew up in Missouri. I grew up in a small town called El Dorado Springs. We didn't know better enough to call it El Dorado Springs. We called it El Dorado. And so I was used to a small Midwestern town lifestyle, and I wanted to kind of bring that into it, hence having a hillbilly cult, hence having a kind of a Midwestern feel to it. And a lot of the characters were loosely based on people I know. They always say don't write yourself into a film, but I feel like I did that a little bit with the main character. And I've got brothers, so my own brothers share some of the qualities with the other brother who is kind of, he likes the ladies. He's always got a different lady on his arm, and it's just it's amusing how that happens. I keep telling my twin brother that I did not write him into the film, but he does share some qualities. I guess I have to admit. The best friend in the film is loosely based on a couple of my friends. So yeah, since it was my first feature length script, I kind of just went through and did a checklist of people that I know and just kind of found a way to get them into the film.
I mean, hey, you got to use whatever characters you can come up with. I mean, gosh, if half the directors weren't thinking that, they probably wouldn't have stories,
Yeah, well, and they're obviously caricatures of those
Yeah.
people. They're not exactly like them. Especially because it's a comedy and because it's a little over the top. Everything was kind of dialed up to 11 for that.
Yeah. Just based on what Eldritch USA and all that is, would you ever do another kind of story based on another town or based on your own town?
It's possible. Some of the other horror ideas I had, I really like the idea of keeping things kind of a Midwestern flair. In fact, that's one of the things that people here who have seen the film, they've asked me to look at doing some of the more Midwestern monster stories. I guess there's some Missouri monster called Momo or something that I've never heard of before. So I got to look into that. I actually live like a quarter of a mile away from a place here called the Albino Farm, which has a kind of a history with it, and also another spot called the Hatchet Man Bridge. So there's some different elements that I could bring into that. As far as just doing small town life, I grew up on a lot of Steven Spielberg films, E.T. and Goonies, and I feel like they reflect kind of a small town kids going around on bikes kind of feel. I wouldn't mind doing more stories that fit into that profile.
God, just the way you were saying that's just like, it's gonna be a good movie. Well, and that's the thing, just like with my podcast, you'll never know how good it's gonna be until it gets out there. And like you said, just with distribution, trying to get that, making it so it's on a higher level to where people probably will be like, oh, hey, I'll give it a try, where people like me will be like, ooh, independent filmmaker? Yes, please. I had a lot of, Peter Anthony, who just did Roseblood, that one ended up being huge. And even he didn't know that. So as I always say, all you can do is be like, hey, this is my film, like it or not. I put my heart into it. And
yeah, we tried our best to more than anything just make it a fun film, so that whenever you walked away from it, no matter what, you at least you got some tunes stuck in your head, and there were some scenes in it that gave you a good chuckle. I'm not going to say there's a bunch of jump scares or anything like that in the film, but it does definitely have kind of an underlying horror vibe that gives you some creepiness.
Nice. Did you ever think about doing podcasting or anything like that had the filmmaking not been your passion?
Not really. I hadn't really looked down that route. I've been on a few podcasts now, and it's definitely enjoyable. I've been on some where, we'll talk about the film for 5 minutes, and then we spend the rest of the time talking about pop culture stuff. So it's definitely enjoyable. I watch my fair share of movies and play video games and read comic books and try to stay up on pop culture news. But yeah, I hadn't really tried going down that route.
Hey, it has its ups and downs, just like everything else. Kind of sucks sometimes, when you've been doing it for 4 years and haven't gotten that big fan base that you want. But you know what? You got to keep doing it, and one day hopefully that will happen. But I enjoy doing it.
Yeah, well, that's the key thing is if it's something that you're enjoying and you're able to put out some good content, then really that's all that matters. If people enjoy it, great, and if not, that's all right.
Oh, definitely. Just like with your films, you gotta have that love for what you're doing, and if you don't have that love for what you're doing, it shows up.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Definitely. Heck, you can see that with some of the Hollywood movies we got today, where it's just like, well, it's the end of the trilogy. Let's just wrap this up,
Or sometimes, they do a trilogy and that's all they were planning on doing. And then they ended up making a 4 or 5 and 6. And you're just like, why are you still going?
Yeah. Star Wars is that way. Oh, God. I'm so good. I'll be glad when that's done with.
It sounds like they're still planning on making a lot more.
Oh. And yet they don't realize why people aren't buying into it anymore. It's just like, it's gone and past. That's just like with Jaws, you're never going to touch the original. The second one was at least decent enough, and then the third and fourth were just like, oh my God. Especially the fourth, the revenge.
Yeah, with the Star Wars stuff, it's kind of hit or miss. I felt like a lot of people didn't like 7 because it was so similar to 4, but I felt like they set the stage for a lot of cool stuff they could have done, and then I felt like 8 and 9 they just didn't follow through well. But Rogue One was a lot of fun, and The Mandalorian's been a lot of fun, and you just kind of it's just hit or miss.
Oh, definitely. So other than making films, what else do you like doing or enjoy doing?
I got a wide variety of things. My wife would say I have too many hobbies. So I play a lot of board games. I actually do a lot of painting of models for board games. So I actually had a Muppet team for a game called Blood Bowl custom commission for me that I had a sculptor go out and sculpt, I think, 73 different pieces for it. So I had those 3D printed and then I painted those up. I also play a lot of different instruments and play with bands on occasion. I also, I'm trying to think some of the different things that I do. I play video games and movies, and I'm obviously working on new films. And then I also have a full-time job and 5 kids and a grandkid. So it's I stay a little busy.
Definitely. What was your first ever scary movie growing up?
Oh gosh, I don't even remember the name of it. The first one I remember was one that was on TV briefly. It was one of those like where they would show it. It was a made-for-TV movie, and they would show it once and you never see it again. But I know it was about some guys who wrongfully accused a black man of doing some crime, and he hid inside a scarecrow that was out in a field, and they finally figured out where he was and they killed him, and then the scarecrow comes back to life and then goes through and kills each of them. Wow. It was really well done. I remember it being really scary, and I really enjoyed that. But probably moving on from that, the ones that really stuck with me were like Halloween. The Thing is my favorite. Alien and Aliens are great ones. You pull a lot of influence from those.
Yeah, I mean, heck, Alien. Who would have ever thought that was going to be a big deal? I mean, you look at a lot of those movies back then. Halloween. I mean, just a basic, like you said earlier, there wasn't much gore, no blood really, and people were probably thinking, "Oh, hey, this is going to be another drive-in movie film." Well, it took off from there and got better.
Yeah. Oh, Alien's so great. The pacing of it and the way they build the tension, and honestly, having a decent sci-fi horror is so rare. It's nice
definitely.
whenever it's pulled off.
Well, that's like a 2001 Space Odyssey where they turned a supercomputer evil. It's like you don't think it sounds good on paper, but yet you watch the movie and it just gets you there.
So the premiere for Eldritch was at our local Alamo Draft House here in Springfield. If you ever get a chance to come down here, that draft house is themed after 2001 Space Odyssey. So whenever you walk in the front doors, they have this massive HAL behind the desk that you look at whenever you're ordering your tickets. It's a lot of fun.
Oh God, that's all we need to see HAL again. that fucking computer. I was waiting for that movie to be like, you can't unplug this cocksucker. Like, come on now.
Not when he controls everything.
Yeah. He still kills him in the end anyway. So it's just like, ugh. But, and The Thing, another one of John Carpenter's great movies that the critics hated. And
it's so good, and I think anybody who watches it now would have to agree. In fact, they did a 4K remaster recently, so if you watch it like on a PS5 or whatever with the 4K remaster, it looks like it was shot like last week. It looks so good. I'm actually waiting for them to do the 4K remaster of Big Trouble in Little China because that's another one of his films that's my favorite.
John Carpenter couldn't do any wrong, but that's the thing. As soon as, he was judged for those films, he went back to independent films, which, I think if people would have given him a chance, because Big Trouble in Little China, it wasn't Halloween, it wasn't The Thing or They Live, but it was something that knew that he was trying, and it still worked.
It was a fun movie. I mean, say what you will about it. It was fun. You could tell that everybody was having a blast making it, and they did some weird stuff. And sometimes weird stuff is great. You just got to roll with it.
I still love when Kurt Russell shoots up in the air and the thing comes down and hits him.
Yeah.
Kurt Russell, if them two could ever get back together to create a movie, that would be, I'd go see that
they
movie.
did, what was it? Escape from LA, but that's not super recent, but I know that was at least the two of them getting back together again.
Yeah. Escape from New York will always be one of my favorite ones. Just how they set the scene for, it's 1990 and New York is now transformed into a prison, and it's just like, wow.
Reminds me of Demolition Man whenever they start at the beginning of that, and they're trying to go through and I'm trying to remember what the town was. Was it Los Angeles? Was just a mess, and they were sending Sylvester Stallone.
Can't figure out the 3 seashells or whatever it was.
Oh, that's probably the greatest joke from that movie. I've often wanted to just put three seashells in my own bathroom just to mess with people who come over.
Oh God. That would suck. If I ever came over, that'd be like, what the hell are you trying to do here? What are these 3 seashells for? So with some of your favorite movies being John Carpenter and all that, was Assault on Precinct 13 one of those favorite movies of yours?
It was really good. It was definitely a different film for him. It was much more action driven. It didn't have that. It still had the suspense, but it didn't have that horror vibe that he usually builds into things.
Yeah.
Even Big Trouble in Little China had an underlying horror vibe with all these ancient Chinese, monsters and things like that. So I still enjoyed it, but I would have to say that the John Carpenter films that I love the most tend to have that supernatural vibe to them.
Oh, definitely. I mean, with Assault on Precinct 13, I've always said it kind of laid the groundwork of how he would do with Halloween, where the pacing and the story behind it and kind of that character development thrown in there. And like I've told my friend Kyle Flett, who runs Flett's Movies and Pop Culture 13 on YouTube, I love when a movie can get that pacing where it's slow, but it's not overly slow, and where it just flows into the next scene, or there's a reason for that scene being in the movie, where nowadays you get some of those movies and it's just like, wait, why was that scene in there?
Yeah. No, and sometimes slow burn can be really great. I don't know if you saw the most recent Mike Flanagan series. I guess it's not the most recent, but Midnight Mass. That series had such a slow burn to it, but it ended up being probably one of the best things from Mike Flanagan I've ever seen. It was so good.
Never even heard of it.
Well, you should. If you've got Netflix, you need to watch it. It's you go into it thinking it's a movie about one thing, and then when you finally realize what it's about, you're already deep into it, and it just really takes you on a ride. It's great.
Yeah. Oh crap! She's in the kitchen. I can't say that she doesn't like Pulp Fiction.
Oh.
I can come out.
Yeah, she's not a fan of Quentin Tarantino.
Quentin Tarantino is really good. He can be a little on the vulgar side, but
oh yeah, he can.
But he has a way of really drawing you into a scene. When you watch the beginning of Inglourious Basterds, you have this sense that something is wrong, and you have no idea what until the camera pans down below the floor, and then that just elevates the scene so much. He really has a way of establishing a scene and really just pulling you into it.
Another great movie that was actually based on an original Inglourious Basterds movie with Bo Svenson. That one, I haven't really seen much of the one that Quentin Tarantino did, but the original one, that was really good.
Yeah.
And I've heard good things about the one that Quentin Tarantino did.
Oh, I highly recommend it.
Pulp Fiction was one of my favorites. I remember being a kid in the 90s, being 6 years old in 1999, and my dad's let me watch that. It's just like, oh, good.
Oh,
Lord.
man.
I know, right? Oh, I was 6 years old in 1999 when they had the AMC horror thing that they did during Halloween. And Halloween H2O was now 1 year old by that point, and it scared the crap on me. It really did. I ran into my bedroom, and what does my older brother do but grabs me, puts me back on the floor, and sits on me and says, "You're going to watch this movie."
Oh, no.
And so I had nightmares for probably months because it's that mask. And you wanting to know why something like that would happen. And of course, my dad had to tell me it's just a movie, And so it was definitely a very trying time when I was a kid, but it gave me a love for horror movies. I mean, heck, I couldn't watch Halloween or any horror movie, that fact, alone until I finally forced myself after graduating from high school and all that. I was like, you know what? I'm going to sit in the dark and watch these movies. And oh God, just, and surround sound all around you. So it's like thinking you're like, okay, where's Jason now? Where's Michael? Where's Freddy?
Whenever I was a kid, the one that really got to me, I was reading a lot of Stephen King at the time, and I got to the end of Misery, and I had I finished it, and I had my next Stephen King book out in the car, out in the driveway, and I'm like 12 years old or whatever, and I had to go out there, but the end of that book was so vivid with the guy worrying that Annie Banks was just around the corner, that he didn't really kill her. And so I think I remember I took a baseball bat out with me to the car to get my next book. And then later as an adult, I watched Paranormal Activity, and the film didn't let out until it was like, I think it was opening night. I went to one of the really late showings. And so I didn't get home, and it was like 3 a.m, which is when all the bad stuff happens in Paranormal Activity. So I think it took me forever to fall asleep that night, because it was just that was one of the ones that just got into my head, even though it was a low budget film. They did such a good job selling it.
Oh, definitely. I mean, look at Blair Witch Project, and there's theories out there that the guys purposely did all these things just to kill the woman in the end, because you never see the killer or the witch as they call it. So. Which, granted, I don't know. Maybe they did. Who knows? But I think Paranormal Activity was, and God, I was probably, maybe a teenager when that movie came out. Still scared the crap out of me.
Yeah.
Especially with her sitting over him, sniffing him, and then looking at the camera and leaping at it. It's just like, ugh. I told my wife, I'm like, if you're ever haunted by a ghost, as soon as that cocksucker does some of the things that thing did, it's like, yep, you can have her.
Yeah,
I feel bad for saying that, but yep.
those demonic possession ones will get to you.
Oh yeah, The Exorcist was the biggest one for me.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it was so well done, and the girl who played the main the character in that, just the transformation that she goes through in that film is just amazing.
yep, Linda Blair.
Hmm.
I mean, you had that. You had Poltergeist. You had.
I was gonna say I think I have a pop figure of her around here somewhere. and of course, whenever I say that, I can't find it. I do have Bruce Campbell, but
Nice. I need to get some Funko Pops more. I have Groot. I have Delvin Cook. I think Adam Thielen. I have, but yet my friend Mark, if you're ever able to be on his show, you'll see how much he has, and it blows my collection away. Oh, a whole room. I mean, just anytime you see it, it's weird. But like I told them, I said, God, never divorce your wife, man. If she's allowing you to have that big of a man cave, do not divorce her.
either that or she'll take half of his Funko Pops.
Yeah. My wife threatened me with she'll take half my video games. It's like, no. But yeah. So I'm gonna do something a little bit new that I've never done before on this podcast. It's gonna be a lightning round.
Uh-oh.
So even though we heard a few things that you like, favorite music?
Favorite music? Probably the Lumineers.
Favorite TV show?
Oh gosh. As weird as it sounds, because it's an older one, I'm gonna have to say Frasier. We watch Frasier a lot.
The show that's about nothing. I love pretty much how that's how they showed it off, as it was supposed to be a show about nothing and then turned into one of the best shows out there.
Yeah, the writers on Frasier are super clever. They had a way of kind of taking everything off into a different path and then bringing it back together in ways that you didn't even expect. So good.
Favorite horror movie, not Halloween?
Oh gosh. Well, probably The Thing. The Thing is probably in my top 5 movies of all movie styles. Is the Thing's up there.
Nice. Like they always say, and I enjoyed this very much. Hopefully your movie gets a distribution so I can watch it. Unlike some other independent filmmakers that I was supposed to interview, and I asked them, well, what's your film about? And they're like, we haven't even started filming yet. It's like, oh God. So then you have to try and fill that out and try and talk with them. And it was dead air. I was like 10 minutes in, I'm like, you know what, guys, I'm sorry. My wife just called, she's at the hospital sick. And I literally used that excuse to get out of it because I mean, it was just bad. And just the answers were bland, where with you had great answers, and it made me want to watch it makes me want to, heck, if I had that much money, I'd probably distribute it myself if I could, just to see it.
I think we're well positioned to get something in place and to get some distribution going. I think it's just a matter of people looking at it. We've got, like I said, several people who are supposed to be looking at it. Several of them are at Cannes right now, but as soon as they get back from Cannes, they're supposed to check it out and then get back with us. But I think we've got the right eyes looking at it.
Yeah, definitely. So, thank you so very much for this interview.
Sure thing.
Hopefully, I didn't turn you off from podcasts.
No, I've been on several podcasts before, so you did no such thing.
Everyone's probably like, oh God, he did so well with interviews, and then Ryan came on his show, and poor Ryan was trying to make it better than what Steven could do it. You know what, everyone? You're probably right.
That is not what I said.
Hey, no one would deny it. I mean, gosh, this is probably lower budget than half of the even lower budget films are today. But thank you so very much, and have a great one, man.
All right. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sure thing.
See you later. Bye. And that was my interview with Ryan Smith. He was a great interview. I really loved doing it. He was able to tell me a lot more about his films and his ideas for films. And if you want to catch me again tonight, I will be on YouTube and Facebook doing my review of the 1966 spaghetti western classic, Django. Not Django Unchained, but Django. So thank you so very much. Also, go check out Kyle Curtis Flett and his podcast, which is Flett's Movies and Pulp Culture 13. Go check out Robert Palmer and the Broken System podcast. Go check out Mark Benset and the Talking Shit Show. And also go check out the rest of us on the deluxeeditionnetwork.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. We appreciate the love and support, and we'll talk to you later. Thank you. Oop.
This podcast is part of the Deluxe Edition Network. To find other great shows on the network, head over to deluxeeditionnetwork.com. That's deluxeeditionnetwork.com.